lastly, I just wanted to say branding is so emotional that stakeholders get really in the weeds and they might challenge you on some decisions or there might be debates. Just go test it. If people are
Right.
splitting hairs on like this logo versus that logo, just take it to the market and make sure your audience votes before you get too all up in your head about it.
Hello, fellow marketers, leaders, and listeners. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Call to Action. I'm Janet, CEO of Aimtel and host of Call to Action. Super excited to be joined with my co-host, as always, Tucker Delaney-Wynn. He's our Director of Marketing Services at Aimtel. And also, we have a very special guest. You'll see there's a third person here, Leah Ryder. Very excited to have both Leah and Tucker today to share all things about brand marketing, awareness, and positioning. Do you guys want to say a little quick hello to our audience?
Hello. Happy to be here and so happy you're here, Leah.
Thanks. I am so excited. Longtime listener, first time guest.
Yay. We're so thrilled to have you, Leah. Thanks for agreeing to join us today. If you don't know Leah, then you need to know her. She is currently the VP Head of Marketing at Outshift by Cisco. She's a seasoned brand builder and content marketing strategist. So if you love the product, brand, or any content from Trello, you have Leah to thank for that. She is one of the team members and former head of marketing of Trello who really spearheaded the strategy there. So she spent several years at Trello developing the brand, which we'll talk about today. When she became the head of marketing at Trello, she led the full strategy in the team. And most notably, she led their rebrand, which we'll talk about, and even scaled the Trello blog, which I had the honor to work on with her. So when she moved on to her current role at Outshift, the Trello blog had reached nearly 1 million readers per month in over 6 different languages. So pretty phenomenal feat of brand content programming. And today, Leah develops and leads the marketing strategy and department for Outshift by Cisco. So it's Cisco's emerging technology incubator. You can think of that functioning like a startup within the company. So they really focus on identifying and developing what's next in the market, especially around agentic AI and quantum computing and quantum networking. So some pretty wild and innovative stuff that they're doing. So we're going to talk about it today. Leah is the creative force behind the Outshift name. And she's going to share a lot of the behind the scenes of how they even approach all this. It's truly looks like magic, but it's a lot of strategic, incredible work that her and her team are doing. And finally, just a full disclosure, Leah is a client of Aimtel. We're honored to work with her for several years. It's been an absolute privilege. So we'll also be talking about ways that Aimtel supported on the Trello side with Outshift. And so, it's going to be a pretty chock full episode. I'm pumped to get into it if you guys if you're ready to go. Before we kind of open this up, I'd love to just hear from you if there was, anything you want to kind of share. I just gave you a kind of full intro, but I definitely would love for you to add anything maybe that I missed and give a little bit more context of who you are and what you do.
Well, I think you did a really good job. Janet asked me for a bio prior to this, and I said, I don't have one at the moment. But no, I say we constantly, because what are we without our team? But the marketing team at Outshift is a fantastic team and is doing some really interesting category creation marketing work. So we're spending a lot of time in the unknown, trying to establish new ideas, new technical terms, new technologies. And then behind it, we have a name of this brand for Outshift, which I'm going to call relatively new. So we launched it 2.5 years ago. So it's still a toddler, if we want to put it in those terms. And we've built everything from the ground up, including the website, the blog, our newsletter, YouTube channel, social channels, webinar program, product launch tiers, everything. And so there's lots behind it as well. And it's been a really awesome challenge and experience to do that also within an enterprise. So hopefully today we'll have a good conversation on that push and pull between like startup and enterprise. And I'll try and give insights for people no matter what type of company you're in, because I'm kind of in all of them simultaneously.
Definitely. And the experience with Trello that you joined Trello before it was acquired by Atlassian. So you had that startup
Yeah, so
founding
I was there
experience
for 8
beforehand.
years. Yeah, 8 years
Wow.
at Trello through the acquisition, helping to shepherd the brand over through that, and then scaling it and bringing on our Trello Enterprise brand and, sales funnel and all of that. There's a lot behind that story as well.
Amazing. Well, a lot to get into. So just to recap, yeah, let's do it. So we're going to cover a lot as Leah just shared. The importance of brand awareness and positioning, how to build a brand, especially in a saturated market. Creating these frameworks, these processes, working with your team to build like a full marketing content engine. And as Leah just mentioned, she's going to share. We're going to talk through a bunch of real examples of how to actually do this. So if you're new to Call to Action, or you've listened maybe a couple of times before, in each episode, we analyze and discuss the latest trends, tactics, hot takes in the B2B marketing industry. And we always conclude every episode with one call to action. So you're going to get a ton of information on this episode, but even if you just want to skip to the end as a recap, but you will get one actionable next step you can take to your own marketing programs in your organization. So let's do it. We're going to get deep in the rabbit holes and then we'll zoom right back out at the end. All right, Leah and Tucker. So just to orient ourselves and our audience, before we get into all the incredible things and inside Leah's head, honestly, we need to get there as soon as possible. However, we definitely like to orient ourselves and make sure that we're staying informed, looking ahead, looking back as well. We're going to do a lot of look backs in this episode, which I'm pumped about. But there is a lot of research coming out, especially because we're recording this. It's February 2026, going into March. And a lot of reports are coming out, a lot of analysis of 2025. So what's exciting, actually, so HubSpot just came out with their 2026 State of Marketing report. And so what we're looking at is a screenshot from the report, and it surveyed marketers, of course, and they asked them, like, what's new? What are your top marketing goals for 2026? And the number one is increasing brand awareness, reaching new audiences. The second one there is increasing revenue and sales. So as you can see, there is this pretty strong tension here between the two. And then it goes on to share, increasing customer conversion rate, building customer connection, closing more deals, of course. If you didn't say that, then, what are you even doing? However, I think what was also interesting is that they received research and responses from marketers, and the branding investments that they saw delivered the highest ROI was ding, 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 brand awareness campaigns. 29% was the top response. So I was pretty excited when I saw this. The third one down, actually, brand messaging framework development, then visual identity systems, brand partnership and sponsorship opportunities, internal brand culture initiatives. So it's like all things, this is around branding investments, but I think this is really excited to see that, stuff that usually maybe people don't feel like it works is actually, it's working. I found another report from McKinsey did of marketers. These are actually European CMOs, which is an interesting subset of the CMO world. And they ranked their top 20 marketing topics of importance. And guess what the number one was? It was branding. So we're seeing this in several places. I'm really excited. Branding's back, I would say. Like, it's something that I think as marketers, we're always trying to advocate for. And I think there's a lot of, clear goals and alignment across industries. This is actually, if we go back to the HubSpot one, when you click through the report, you'll see it was kind of the top choice. It was the top goal across, small business to enterprise. So Leah, I'd love to start with you. Tucker, I definitely want to hear your opinion too, but love to just what are your observations on this data? Are there any surprises that you're seeing? This is resonating in the market and what you're seeing from these reports.
I am so glad that you do this in your episodes because we all get really busy and I don't have time. I don't make time to read these reports as much as I should. And this is like Christmas to me, seeing this. It was like a real shot in the arm because I think we're all under a lot of pressure right now to deliver like more with less. And how is AI going to be changing how we work and where is our value? And it's thrilling to me to see brand and brand awareness campaigns delivering high ROI. And also on that third slide, the CMO one, I was looking at that. There was like this cross-report theme, legend on the right. So there's be trusted, be effective, be bold, and they've color-coded what the value of the items are. So not only is branding number one, it is identified as the be trusted theme for CMOs. And I think that speaks volumes about where we're at as marketers, like delivering trust, which is the backbone for companies to build customer engagements, long-term customer value, positive brand association and awareness to bring in more customers down the road. I think it's just very exciting to see everybody kind of like recognizing that like branding's that girl, and we all, need to make investments, and those investments deliver meaningful business impact.
Absolutely.
There's some bright spots in 2026, let me tell you, as I look at this. Tucker, what do you
Yes,
think?
definitely.
Yeah, no, I love that, Leah. And you mentioned trust. I think that's like a huge thing. Know, like, and trust. And that's what branding does. It helps you get to know, like, and trust a certain brand. I feel like I'm not quite sure what the metaphor is here, where I feel like I don't know if we've gone through the looking glass or if we went through the looking glass and then came back to the right side of the mirror. But like there was a stretch of years where I feel like marketing turned into like chemistry, where everyone was trying to like attribute the exact lead to a one-to-one thing. And it just became honestly kind of a mess. And I feel like almost through the help of AI, the need for great branding, great messaging frameworks, which I know is also pretty high up on that chart, has become really apparent. And the brands that do that are clearly the ones that are winning, and not just marketing, but I think leaders and organizations overall are starting to recognize that. So I'm really excited about that. And I'll also just note, I think the top challenge I saw in 2026 was around measuring ROI. But I think what excites me, both in the fact that branding is a top priority and measuring the ROI of your marketing is a top priority, is that those are both really creative endeavors. So I think marketing as a creative exercise, as a creative pursuit, is really coming back in full force. And I'm really excited both about what companies and brands are going to start doing to tell great stories and really do great branding campaigns, but also how they're going to get creative in telling that story of ROI. I think there's some really exciting visual ways to do that. And I'm really excited for where that's going. I don't know, Jen, what you thought about it.
I'm picking up here. I'm asking you another question, because I feel like you both have this very strong skill of seeing the full, the classic full funnel and the full audience customer like journey with a company, from all the way from getting introduced to the brand down to converting to a customer. But I see here there's like there's an ongoing tension, and you guys already touched on, like, there's always been this tension of like, what do we prioritize first? Like, how do we attribute the success of our company or product, and in what ways, and how does marketing lead that or not? And I think we're all, of course, very excited that branding is a big part of that, and it's very clear in the data. But how are you defining the success of brand, this kind of like brand versus conversion, marketing versus sales? I think what my observation is that like a lot of this is getting actually, we're starting to speak the same language now, but clearly it's a challenge of like, how do we even define this? So I'm curious how you two, Leah, if you want to kick us off and talk through that, like how are you thinking about this at the high level, as leading marketing at Outshift and before as well?
I mean, obviously the cop-out answer is it depends. You're going from like 0 to 1. So if there's no brand and then you're creating a brand, then there's like a certain subset of measuring. And then if you're like nurturing or growing a brand and ongoing, there's like a different subset of measurements. But we look at all of the engagement metrics. I'd like to kind of, from awareness through engagement conversion metrics, I think all of those have some measurement of like brand effectiveness in them. So what do I mean by that? So for example, even just looking at like traffic sources, so like how much traffic is coming in non-branded versus branded traffic, and then where are those sources coming from? and what is their engagement. So like, what's their time on page? How are they connecting with the CTAs that you have? I think those things, those metrics help create a bridge, I think, to discuss with your leaders brand effectiveness. So you don't have to sit just in the higher level of like brand impressions or sentiment analysis. But those things are good too. And then at the bottom end, in terms of like conversion rates and sales conversations, if you have your business development leaders and team asking questions, even qualitatively, like, how did you find out about us? How do you feel about it? Or if you can do surveys, in-app surveys, you can kind of pick up pieces along the way. And just, I think this is like measuring the ROI is telling a story with data. So rather than like, there's no, I think Tucker, like what you were saying, like we got mostly into the science of like, how it's the exact thing. I don't know if that exists, but measuring signals along the entire journey and then kind of stitching those together into like, do we think we are resonating with our target audiences? Are they responding to messages that we have? What is generally their sentiment about what they feel about the brand and their experiences with us? And are they like referring us to other people? I think all of that's measurable and important.
I totally agree. I love multiple things you said there, Leah. I think the bridge is so important. How do you create that bridge from all the things marketing's doing into something that leadership, that non-marketers can easily understand and get excited about? And I also agree that at super high levels on the top of funnel, metrics can start to sometimes feel a little bit abstract. So really telling an intentional story that requires creativity and strategic thinking to leadership and others is important. One thing I would add, and Jenny, you probably know what I'm going to say here, is, but I love focusing on the who, the literal people who are liking and engaging with your post. I think that continues to be a really underrated thing that does not get included in reports enough. I see just these cool, fancy looking charts that are like huge amount of dollars of influenced pipeline, which is great.
Right.
Love that.
But who is in there?
Exactly. And we know sales is focused on who. We know that they're thinking directly about the people that they're talking to in conversations. So what we started doing a lot of is literally showing screenshots of, hey, did you know the CIO of Deloitte has liked our last 5 thought leader posts, and putting the screenshot of that person liking the posts? That is something that I see again and again, lighting up people in the room and being like, whoa, literally driving excitement. So I think bringing in the actual who you're engaging, whether that's top, middle, or bottom of funnel, and bringing that as part of the bridge, as you're saying, Leah, I think is a great way to really tell that story as well. And it's incremental. I've heard someone say incrementality is really key in attribution too, but I think that's a great piece of it. Yeah, I don't know,
I'm
Jen.
glad you pointed that out actually, because I do that. We keep like I just keep like a data, like basically in Confluence, actually, just like a table. And anytime I see a really good shout out for the brand, I just throw it in there.
Smart.
With the link, and they become part of the zeitgeist. Like we had a Cisco customer call up our SVP and request to bring the team into a meeting because they read about Outshift in a sponsored content piece that we posted on
Amazing.
Wall Street Journal.
There you go.
And
Kudos to that person
for
mentioning where you found them.
Right. So we literally landed a customer conversation, and you might dismiss that as like qualitative, or singular data point. But if they were motivated enough to do that, then how many other people went on their own personal research journey?
Yeah.
It's illustrative of a larger thing that's probably going on there.
Yeah. I think we talked about this a lot in a previous call to action episode. It's episode 12, but I wanted to bring it back again because I keep hearing this and it keeps coming up. And what we're saying right now is this chart and graphic I have on the screen. It's from the B2B Institute. It's LinkedIn's think tank, actually. And they call it the 95-5 rule. And what we're talking about right now is like brand is all about marketing to future buyers, people who you may consider potentially out of market currently or just not ready to engage with your company. But then they will become that the current buyers, the in-market 5%, but what they see is that really only 5% of your audience is actively ready for those conversations to talk to your sales team or however you have it set up. And so you just illustrated that really well, Lisa. Like Leah, it was that person was paying attention. They were reading the content, but you may miss them if you didn't have that branded content and those campaigns running. And then when they were ready, they took action because it was very clear of how they got, connected with your organization. So I've been seeing it from this context too. And I think this is a really helpful way to kind of also build that bridge to have these conversations of the value of brand and brand marketing, because you don't want to, like, the moment that you want to start to, kind of turn on the sales activation engine, you don't want to start to then simultaneously build the audience. The audience needs to be there for you to tap into. So you're just going to be sitting on your hands waiting, if you just start to like, hey, let's throw out a lead gen campaign and see who comes in. It's like, no one's going to respond because they don't know who you are.
Yep.
And it kind of feels like we've been spending the past few years, we've been spending 95% of our time on that 5% of in-market buyers.
Yeah,
I don't think
exactly. Right.
the other way, but maybe we could just do 50-50.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Tearing our hair out because what we think is the 5% is actually the 95%, and they're not ready to book a demo,
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
I also found this one in some of their research and reports, and it's a little outdated, I guess. It's 2019, which feels so far, like a while ago, but I think you're going to know from this episode that there's a lot of things are coming back around. And I really like this as well, how they framed like the messaging and positioning of like your kind of out market buyers at like top 95% to the sales kind of 5%. So it says like activation in market buyers, like, have that rational messaging, really narrow targeting, a little bit more personalized, and that, the larger, broader targeting, how that more emotional connection really builds that like relationship with them is what we're saying in so many words. So I was curious if you guys have any. I feel like, Leah, you're going to get into this a bit more, and I think we're all excited to get into the weeds a bit, but I want to kind of share this forward because I think we're seeing a lot of this. It's still relevant. I think there's so much change with marketing, but there's so much that stays the same, and there's so much that's just inherently human of how we do these things and we talk to each other. It's not, as you guys have already said, it's not this like not everything's a mathematical equation to solve in a lab. It's very much like, was this like kind of empathetic approach that we're taking to our brand messaging and positioning?
I think the only thing I would change here, I don't know if I agree with emotional message and rational
Right.
message. I think I might do like the purpose message for out market buyers, like the value, and then maybe the value or like the product message for in market. So, just understanding what level of why you need to serve them at what time.
Right.
Because it's also frustrating when you're ready to buy and all you can find is like higher order, why messaging. You're like, show me, but you also want to still feel like what you're doing, the company has like a passion for what they're doing with you.
Right.
So yeah, that's the only change I'd make.
I love it. Hell yeah.
I feel like I'd almost never want those things to be separate, or I certainly wouldn't want emotion to be taken out of any messaging, right? Like, I think especially if you're in market, you want emotion drives action. And I think whether it's on LinkedIn ads or something, you need some sort of emotive element to get people to say, yes, let me jump in, let me take the action. So yeah, it's a good thought too, of just like, change it up a little bit.
Love it. Well, I love where you're going, Leah. Things that you would change, how you approach this. So let's start getting into the how.
In the context of a rebrand, it's when what's working, what you have to work with, no longer serves you, or it's not enough, or it's representing you poorly. And in the context of starting a brand, it's how to show up and have people treat you exactly how you intend to be treated. And so I often, with like non-marketing stakeholders, it's so similar to just how we interact as humans. So, thoughtful about like, how do you look? How do you present yourself? What do you have to say about what drives you to live and work and what's important to you, and all of those things. That just walking through that process is where I like to start with building a brand, and I always just try and remind people, Tucker, like you said, like this is for other actual humans at the end of the day, even all the way through the machines and the LLMs. The purpose is to get to a human. So just picture yourself in front of them and showing off what you're doing. And you should have that really crisp, clear, exciting, buttoned up, visually interesting. That's the goal.
So I guess like some of the most important aspects, like how would you put it in the context of like, I don't know, let's put in some marketing speak. What would be some of those important aspects of a brand when you're thinking about developing it, like even net new? I feel like in the context of Outshift, there was existing stuff. It's like, how do you decide what to bring over, for example? Or like
So
retain?
in both of the cases of the Trello rebrand and then what was used to be Cisco Emerging Technologies and Incubation, and we rebranded to Outshift by Cisco. Really fascinating subset of brand strategy, which is working with a parent brand and then working within the parent brand's visual identity and messaging and ethos, and then coming up with a complementary sub brand that is both also unique and expresses what you need to express. But in all of these cases, or if you're building a new brand, there's the mission, vision, ethos, which I do think gets underrepresented, or people don't attribute marketers to spend time on that. If you are a marketer and your goal is to bring value to the business at the end of the day, you need to spend time there with the founders, the CEOs, the stakeholders. What is the mission of the brand? What is the vision? What are the categories, the product categories, industries that we work in? Who are the target personas that we serve? What are their motivations? What does success look like? Even I like to even get into like culture, rule, like how do we work? There's so much inside there. You can feed off of that for months, content wise, if there's particulars about how the brand works, in terms of how people work inside the company. So that's one. So that's like the culture pillar. Then you have messaging and communication. So like, how do you say what you're doing? What are the terms and the vocabulary that you really believe in? What are those keywords? Then elevator pitch, like how do you say it in 25 words, 100 words, which is really hard. What are the—
It is really hard. Yeah. You're good at that
pillars?
though. Kudos to Leah, because I don't know how she, yeah.
It serves you well. And then, like what are the value pillars? So if someone says, well, what are the top 3 things I should know about your product? 1, 2, 3, like, them, the CEO knows them, the junior engineer knows them. So that's messaging. And then the third is visual. So visual identity, that includes the logo mark, your color palette, your illustration style, how you tell stories visually, what's the experience. And I think all of those things come together, make a brand.
I'd be curious to know, Leah, because you've been at this nexus multiple times of bringing Trello into Atlassian and rebranding, but trying to make it a part of the Atlassian family. And then similar with Outshift by Cisco has to be under Cisco. Like, how do you maintain these original identities during this rebrand? I guess with Trello, for instance, how are you maintaining Trello?
Pull up.
Yeah,
you can pull up the logo. Actually, I have it.
Let's pull it up.
Yeah, this is the original logo, right?
So this is the original one, and it was used for a long time. I don't know, a decade probably. And I think right off the gate, it did great, and it emoted a lot about the human nature of the product, and the icon is like a mini version of the product and whatnot. And also but bits of the brand had already evolved over time. So what you see here is actually to me, looks like a big melee or mashup, because the color palette had evolved post acquisition. So the light blue the blue of the logo is the old Trello blue. The light blue in the background is from the updated Atlassian palette. The logo is Taco the dog, has been the mascot since it was since inception. However, this version of Taco was a thrice evolved version as we changed our illustration style. So I'm getting into the weeds, but I hope that's interesting for people.
No, it is.
Yeah,
And I feel
it
like you
is.
can just tell the attention to detail and level of care, Leah, that you put in and that a marketer should put into how they're thinking about how a brand shows
Right.
up. And just like, I think
But
you were saying maybe even before was like the tip of the spear. Sorry, go ahead.
I know the answer to this question, but wasn't like Taco was part of the discussions though? Of like, do we
Taco was
keep
part of the
Taco or not?
discussions. Yeah,
Which is
because
pretty crazy to think about.
no
Yeah.
other Atlassian portfolio product had a mascot. So part of it's also like the why behind these things. And, this is an extremely valuable part of the identity. Also, Taco served a couple important purposes for the brand. Taco announced new features, like the really big new pop-up, like pause up in over the, I'm mimicking
The board.
going top of the bar in the app, and to tell you about things. It was part of the onboarding.
It was like the
spokesperson, and it promoted the idea that this is your friendly companion and is cares about what you care about, and loves to get to work as long as you're wanting to get to work. Like a dog's kind of up for whatever you're up for. So that was important. And so we had to evaluate and ultimately decide with stakeholders, get buy-in that Taco was worth keeping.
Wow.
But as I explained all those things here, to me, this was like we were busting at the seams of the existing brand and had some evolved, some hadn't, and we were getting caught up in the lack of clarity, and it was not allowing us to best explain and present ourselves. So there was like messaging work and things that was going on behind the scenes, a lot of that as well too.
Yeah, I can reveal the updated version. I think it's still, they still use this overall, but
they still use it.
Yeah.
So when you're evolving a brand inside of a parent brand, take the brand identity system of the parent brand and say, how much of this can we use and remix into recipes that serve us? And then, start negotiating, I would say. So as an example, you can see the blue is updated here to the Atlassian blue, but we added a gradient to kind of give it a little bit more life out of like the matte blue. I mean, there's different treatments that we produced, but that was important to us, was to kind of add some of that life in. Also, the font is the Atlassian font. However, the E has been modified specifically just for the logo, and we tried to make it look like it was smiling, to kind of inherit that handwritten look of the old logo, which was friendly. So those were like two examples.
Well, and for those that don't know, Trello is a productivity tool. So you're taking a lot of like your historically like analog ways of organizing your work to a digital product and system. So people were, the concept of a sticky note was like the genesis of this, where you'd write down your to-dos on a sticky note, put them on a wall, and then Trello digitized all of that. So I feel like, like that, I love what you just said, Leah, of that connection of the still feeling like you're writing or seeing that, human aspect of productivity is important to keep that through line.
And we went to the Trello community, to a lot of, Trello fans that we knew before we launched, and we did qualitative user testing with them before we produced this and the updated messaging, and during and after, to get their thoughts on how they thought it was progressing and whether they felt like they could recognize their brand affinity in the updated as well, because there's Trello has a lot of really strong brand affinity, and a lot of people love using it because it's a mirror back to them about their own work. And so they see a lot of themselves in it and their use of the tool. And so anytime we did anything, there was a certain amount of like, who moved my cheese response. And so it wasn't a simple flip of the switch. It had to be done really carefully in order to not rock the boat too much for those highly engaged users who were the most valuable to us.
Right. Yeah, there's like that. I guess there's that chart that we were looking at. We were only looking at your audience before their customer, but you have to take in consideration your current customers too, like your most loyal fans. It's not just about the folks that you're trying to bring in.
Yeah, and then on top of it, though, the way that it was before wasn't serving us for the new buyers or the new market because it didn't fit for the Atlassian portfolio and at the Atlassian corporate messaging level, branding level. It looked like the odd one out. And so it was not as easy for them to display or talk about the portfolio in an integrated way, even down to the messaging of like, what is Jira for? What is Trello for? That was part of the work that we did with the rebrand because we were also trying to amplify and enable the entire organization to like embrace Trello as part of the portfolio in a more integrated way.
Right. I would love to go back into the archives, as I was just explaining, and share a brand campaign that Leah and her team created. And then what was exciting about it is repurposed a couple of years later, actually. So I'll let Leah tell the story of where this came from, but it was all around embracing remote work. And the campaign was Embrace Remote. So tell us what we're looking at here, Leah, on video and for folks who are listening in.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just, like you said, we talked just now about brand systems, which is like the foundation, but then it's like branding is not done there. That's just getting things set up. And then you have to actualize the brand in brand campaigns. So how Janet and I kind of came to this for this podcast was, and what we saw in that data is like what's old is new again, or maybe like Tucker, like you said, we like went through the looking glass and have come back out and kind of realized, so what happened with this campaign, which we ran starting in 2017, I think we ran it for about a year. All of the elements of what made this great are very much on the table right now for my team and how we're discussing setting up campaigns and launching content and gaining audience and mind share. So I'll kind of talk about it in the context of today as well. But this campaign launched in 2017. I'd like to give full credit to my co-partner, Lauren Moon, who's a product marketing extraordinaire. She's amazing. And I came into Trello as kind of the second wave. So there was this culture of remote work of those first few years that they had really built internally what was so important to them. And that's what I was saying, that first pillar of like the ethos of the company. And Lauren had been there for that. So when I joined and we had then been acquired by Atlassian and we wanted to run a brand campaign for Trello that we'd been planning pre-acquisition, we felt like it was important to carry it forward. And I'm telling you the background of this because it matters. We had no support, like we had no money. We couldn't get any additional resources. We had to do it kind of like on our own. And so this is also for the people out there who are a team of two. You can do it. You can do this with the team of two because we did it. But we basically looked across the whole company and picked up all of the best practices about remote work that were unique and different and that we believed in and that represented the values of what Trello can do for their users and the values of what Trello could do for its employees. And so we produced this ebook of all of those tips and tricks. But then it was a matter of how do we both add authenticity and trust to the ideas and get a really good free amplification platform. So we got in touch with the 9 other really advanced thinkers in remote work. Keep in mind, this was 2017.
Like Buffer. I feel like everyone would be like, oh yeah, Buffer is one of the ones that was a bit well
2016 like meme that's going around. Just take a minute. Think about like, what were you wearing? Like, this is a long time ago. Remote work was not the thing. Like, you could not tell someone you worked at home and they would not understand.
I was definitely in the office full time. Yeah.
So these companies that we had worked with were also very innovative, and they were game. They had something to say. So we featured content and tips from all these 9 other companies. Here's a
Yeah, there's
couple
some
there of,
screenshots here.
you
Yeah,
know,
exactly from the guide.
UNICEF.
Exactly.
And so not only did it lend credibility to our messaging platform and our brand identity as a remote work tool, when it came time to launching the campaign, we equipped them all with these beautiful quote cards for social, guidance on what they could post. We encouraged them to blog about it themselves and that we would amplify their blog in our newsletter, which had a big reach, so a little bit of give and take. And so we had like 9 major partners to push the content out through their own brands. So again, it was like just strengthening through brands and kind of
Right. It was like the
referrals,
beginning days of partnership marketing.
partner
It wasn't
marketing.
even really a thing. And then also what we have on screen here too is I grabbed some screenshots of posts that we would reshare on social. So Intel helped with the campaigns and the blog, and we ran social. And so we had a whole like user generated content. Like people were sharing it themselves of how they use Trello, but also how they work remotely. And then a lot of people were sharing pictures like of Trello boards and their work setup, like their work from home setup, like with their dog. So it was like Taco coming to life. Like it was just this very powerful like way of building that community online and using the hashtag and getting people to use it and kind of like surface this up of how they're working. And yeah, I mean, with the ebook alone, you had 500,000 downloads. It's probably more now, but I think kind of your last time checking the stats.
Not even last time. That was like the campaign,
Wow. Okay.
like the active campaign
Right.
measurement. And now you're probably like, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's now a website page actually on the Trello website. Like it's ungated. It was always ungated, but it's now a full like website, like microsite almost is how they
I'm
built
glad
it.
that they did that because that is
it is.
the number one way to display a long form piece of content for LLMs these days, everybody.
Right.
So no more PDFs, get your HTML pages up. But at the time,
they can read PDFs, but make it easy for them. Put it on your website.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
you can, but
LLMs are lazy.
Yeah, so it was a big discussion at the time because we were very much in the demand gen darling stage of marketing.
Right.
So get those leads, get those emails. Like, what are you doing if you're not building an audience? And we had a good discussion about what to do about it. And we came back to saying, yeah, our data is going to be a little messy. So, I'm sure in that 500,000 downloads, some of them are repeats, but do you take those signals? And the fact to leave it ungated meant we wanted people, as many people out there as possible, to read it. Mm-hmm. That was the most important thing, and to believe it.
Yeah, and then, but to that point, yeah, like there was that tension between the brand and showing conversion and how it's building the pipeline. So what we then did was we took that content and content we were producing on the blog for several years, 2017 to 2020. And leading into the pandemic actually was a unfortunately good timing where we repurposed a lot of that content, took the new content and created additional ebooks. Like the one I'm showing here, it was a work from anywhere guide where we like interviewed folks at Atlassian, at Trello to share like their leadership tactics and kind of it was kind of I feel like this is the middle funnel one where it was like this little hybrid of like showing the product, but also keeping that kind of thought leadership content. And then we also did this one where we brought the voice of the customer. And so we actually did customer interviews and explaining how customers were using Trello to work remotely and how other organizations could do that as well.
This was down funnel. Yeah. So then this was like, you read the initial manifesto, you got it, you got in. Then we had you exposed to our leadership team. I'm pretty sure we did a webinar as well, or at least we did clips and recordings because that last ebook, we produced that in like under a week.
Yep.
By just having them sit on a Zoom, we asked them a bunch of questions, downloaded the transcript, and then turned it into long form piece of content. Because listen, it was the pandemic and we were hustling because all of a sudden the entire world was working from home, and Trello had been doing it for nearly a decade at that point, and all eyes turned to us. And then this was the down funnel piece that we would then engage for.
We did do a webinar. I think I was on that webinar. There was like a webinar, like a community webinar for sure. There was something
Well,
like there was
yeah. The evergreen nature of spending time on really good brand values and messaging platforms is that this launched in 2017. And then when the pandemic hit and Atlassian all the leaders got on the phone and said, how are we going to serve our customers like literally overnight and provide them guidance? They ended up adopting the Embrace Remote hashtag and scaling that out for the Atlassian corporate brand. And we became the consultants for them to scale the values of what we had started into an Atlassian message platform for their entire customer base.
Wow.
And it was old at that point. You know,
it felt old, but it was new again. Yeah. What's old is new again.
It's timeless. It's
right,
timeless.
Exactly.
And that's how you know you've gotten to something meaningful.
Right.
For your brand.
Incredible.
Amazing. And yeah, it's like what I hear you saying, Lee, is you don't want to over-index on something super specific that's only going to make sense for a quarter or two. Like you really want to think about things that are going to be timeless and going to have a really long-term impact when you're thinking about building that brand and reaching folks.
Yeah. So since I spent some time on the Trello side, let's look at it from the same angle, because again, a logo is just the tip of the spear for what the whole purpose of the brand is about. And that certainly was true for this. So I did talk a little bit about what an endorsed brand means, but some of the visual elements here came out of the detective work we did on the mission and the vision for what Outshift was supposed to be. And so you can see how the by Cisco and then the bottom 3 tines of this, what is meant to be like a rev of an engine, are the Cisco blue. And that was kind of an interesting ad to say, like, we are foundationally part of Cisco and our innovations are grounded in the purpose and the vision of Cisco. And then the rest of the 3 tines represent us accelerating forward. And we talked about doing like normal acceleration colors, but red is not really like a color we felt we wanted to convey. So anyways, we went with this orange, dark blue, which is again part of the Cisco palette. They're all within the existing Cisco palette, but pushing towards green. And that's as we shift forward and we drive incubation ahead for Cisco, it's kind of all representative. So last thing, fun fact, the tines of our starburst or of our accelerator are actually the Cisco bridge. So if you look at the Cisco logo, it has the short for San Francisco, and the logo, which also looks like, like a networking kind of audio, or it's actually the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge. And so we just dismantled the bridge, if you will, or deconstructed it into this accelerator. And so there's a lot in it that encompasses why we exist as part of Cisco. All in this tiny little logo.
I think I'd love to round out like your present day with Outshift. So Leah was talking about the logo and how it was Cisco ETNI and then became Outshift. And as I mentioned before, Leah you came up with the name Outshift, right? Like you can.
I did myself. Yeah. I have some small skills some days with brand names.
It's pretty big skills. Incredible. But I'd love to share like kind of, you already touched on a little things that on when we were just talking through Trello and how you through the branding, rebranding, acquisition, and the campaign that you're still effective and really working today with Outshift. But I'd love for you to share kind of some of those quick hit things that are, not even quick hit, but really the most effective aspects of what's still working, what has changed and what hasn't, and what's really been effective for you all at Outshift.
Yeah, I learned so much from the passion of the leaders at Trello. The marketing leader, when I was hired in, Stella Garber, she's CEO of a new app called Hoop.app. And you can see that the passion carrying forward. And that's really important to making an authentic brand. But to me, it taught, if you don't have it, nurture it. Or if it's, it needs to be polished up or you need a coach, it's as much as an internal coaching as it is making something shiny on the surface. And that's was really exciting to me about going over to Cisco and why I wanted to take on the opportunity. So there was an existing business unit called Emerging Technologies and Incubation, and brilliant builders coming up with very forward thinking emerging technologies and trying to, make those into products or to gain traction with existing products. And so I felt like I got to come in as a detective and talk to everybody that was important to them and then start coaching and shining up all these important values and the mission and the vision. And then we wanted to think about how does that function well for Cisco. And that's how we arrived at producing what's called an endorsed brand. So this was intentional. It's not Cisco Outshift. It's not Cisco's Emerging Technologies and Incubation, a descriptive business unit. We made a creative brand, Outshift, endorsed by Cisco in order to put forward first the emerging technologies, innovation brand, and then that it's supported by Cisco. And that allows us to go into new markets where they're not expecting to see Cisco and for us to kind of change their mind and say, hey, you should pay attention to us.
And I'm going to flash on also on the screen what Leah was just saying, like these new markets and new areas that they're building out and expanding the brand around. Primarily, the big one is agentic AI.
So we launched the brand Outshift by Cisco. We identified what our areas are. Agentic AI, superintelligence, and quantum are our current 3 focus areas. And every time we have one, then we build out a whole new branding, visual identity, messaging platform because we're creating new categories. So on the right here is Internet of Agents. We've been working on establishing that category for an entire year. And now we've introduced the Internet of Cognition and we're following the same playbook. What I would say in my pitch about this is you need all hands on deck. So if you're creating a new category, you need your technical stakeholders to be publishing research or patents, or at least explaining what they're looking at and the underpinnings of like how are they creating something that new. Then you need your leaders to have that vision message and be able to really efficiently explain what it is and how it relates to what already existed. So like where are our customers at today and where are you going? And how do you meet in the middle? And then you need all of that art and science of marketing. So you absolutely need your SEO strategy, your AEO strategy to make sure that it's discoverable. And you need that really great visual and storytelling aspect. So here you can see
exactly
the world.
On the right, the agentic AI, Internet of Agents, where you started, and then the new is on the
and we thought like, what's this relationship of humans to agents? Like ideally it's this ecosystem. So the green, the organic is the human productivity, human work. The crystal structures are the agents, which themselves are unique. It's not a plug and play piece of software each time. They're all unique. And how does that all interconnect? In that world, we had all this water flowing between, because it was just like a world and it was kind of meant to connect the flow of ideas. But as we launched the Internet of Cognition, which is the shared knowledge, shared context between agents and between humans and agents, we raised that out and now it's glowing. So you can see that the glowing river system of the world showcasing that category of technology we've created. This superintelligence one, we've gotten a new tool that we're working with to do really rapid A/B testing. So there's multiple tools in the market to do this. We're using one called Heat Seeker, and it's AI augmented, and so it helps generate the campaigns and the campaign variants really, really quickly. And then we run it either as like ourselves or like a fake brand on LinkedIn, and we test target markets against variants on messaging and variants on design. And then we use that for learnings. So lastly, I just wanted to say branding is so emotional that stakeholders get really in the weeds and they might challenge you on some decisions or there might be debates. Just go test it. If people are
Right.
splitting hairs on like this logo versus that logo, just take it to the market
Right.
and make sure your audience votes before you get too all up in your
Yeah.
head about it.
I'd love to, yeah, because just to round us out, like my next question is like, what else is like brand channels are working? And I think the big one, and so this is where Aimtel is helping. One area where Aimtel is helping Outshift and supporting is around what Leah was describing, is like having your executive team or other subject matter experts to share that messaging in the brand. It's not just about the company, the brand sharing and communicating this to market. It's actually like also the folks who are involved in this, the leaders. So I know that I love to hear kind of how you're thinking about this, Leah, but also the success of this. And I know Tucker, so what we're doing, just to give it away, but the executive team and folks, subject matter experts at Outshift are sharing posts, and then we're taking that and we're running ads behind it and putting it directly into the folks that they're trying to target, like audiences. So that's another way, So I would love to hear kind of, if you guys want to speak to the why we're doing that. It's not, that's like the next level of branding. It's not just about the company, it's about the people, back to the who.
Yeah, I want to hear from Tucker about this because he's working with our team on this a lot. But just really quickly, I think this is today's challenge and tactic for 2026 is that we are so inundated by so much information, so much branded content, so much, is it real? Is it AI? That the authenticity is now one of the most important factors.
Right.
And there's a couple of really important ways to get to authenticity. And one of them is to make people inside the company part of the brand and have the brand be spoken through their mouths and not have everybody hide behind the brand. I think maybe we used to think it looked really polished if everything was behind the brand and then people were
Right.
quoted, from the brand. But now we prefer to have the people be the brand. So even the choices on like using the diagrams, like these are like literally internal infrastructure diagrams that the engineering team uses to explain what they're building, exposing parts of those machines, especially as an incubator and like a team that's working in real time and is really important. So all of these choices are important, but also the strategy of where you put your money to push brand awareness. So Tucker, love to hear from you on that.
100%, Leah. I mean, we are seeing 10x, 20x performance of thought leader ads versus brand ads. And we've done things where we've had the one campaign, the same ad set that has ads from a brand and ads from thought leaders. And this isn't just Outship by Cisco, but I've seen this elsewhere too. And the thought leader ads just dwarf the brand ads, even when you're putting the same amount of spend into that. And I think that just shows the deep, unsatiable appetite for thought leadership right now. And I think that what's really underpinning that, as you're saying, Leah, is authenticity, people wanting to see real people talking. And that's where trust is.
Mm-hmm.
We may have been talking, it might have been before the call, Leah, but including the Scotch tape, including hands, including the real things inside of a post, and people loving that stuff. So I think having not just your executives, but all sorts of folks from your company share and then boost that and to start to create that kind of team sport of LinkedIn thought leadership is just huge. And that's really how brands are getting built and such an important component of how it's done.
Right.
And then I guess in the spirit of bringing it full circle, this is kind of makes me think of the Trello campaign you guys were talking about earlier, where you were bringing people in to the embrace remote work and having them share their stories. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing again. With the rise of thought leadership and thought leader ads.
Yeah, that's where my mind goes. Like the purpose of the brand too is to help people tell the story. You want multiple people to be telling the story, sharing the message in different ways, because humans, we interpret things differently. So you want a range of thought and opinion and content going out across different channels as well. It's not just only on LinkedIn, they do YouTube, your own blog. You were talking about like the actual like ebooks, academic research papers, like sharing perspective from other departments, not just the CEO. Like that gets a little dull eventually. So if we're like, there's so many different ways, and all of those, as we talked about, that's an investment that compounds over time. Like if you weren't doing that work with Trello, or you're not doing the stuff that you guys have been building this out for Outshift for several years, this kind of backbone of like how you're thinking about and leading multi-agent system like development and innovation, then you wouldn't be primed, to be one of the leading companies for it. So it's like it all, compounds over time, but having all those different perspectives is what makes it pretty much resonate at the end of the day for folks.
Yep.
So really, if you feel like your team is small, just consider everyone at your entire company is on the marketing team, and you'll feel a little bit better.
Right. Yeah. Make people do. Yeah. I love that actually. It's not just about a few folks producing everything. Everyone has, opinion that people want to hear. Like put it out there and see what resonates and how folks
That's a
are
whole
responding.
episode, honestly. Employee engagement for marketing. If people are curious, we have 2 efforts. One is we called the Speakers Collective. So we encourage technical people to submit CFPs to conferences. And we scan for good conferences, CFPs, deadlines. We analyze our portfolio. We nominate people to submit to CFPs if we think it's a good fit. We help them if they need it with their submissions. Because often talks at conferences get recorded and then you get a video out of it. And
exactly.
Like there's a downstream.
The
other
full
one,
content engine.
Yeah. And people are honestly more motivated to do that than social. We were trying to get more people to post on social organically. It's a bit more of a journey, get people comfortable, but just finding where people are comfortable and letting them express the brand there, and then
so
giving
having
them
that strong foundation. Well, Leah, thank you so much for, like, as we said, we're going to have to, if you're down, we're down, bring you back on. There's so many different avenues we can take this. So thank you for just sharing your experience with us and our audience and how you think about this and how you and your team are, bringing the brand to life across many different ways with Outshift and previously with Trello. And thanks for letting us be a part of it as your agency. And yeah, as we always do, we like to round this out with one call to action. So we're gonna do that right now. I'm gonna kick it to you, Tucker. What's your one call to action for our audience? What are you gonna take away? What are we?
I've gotta go with thought leader ads because I'm passionate about them, and I think more brands gotta keep exploring them. But yeah, if you haven't already, go explore thought leader ads or even thought leader posts. Is there a person at your company that is either already posting on LinkedIn or is a great candidate for that? Can you get them on a Zoom call for 30 or 45 minutes, record them and chop it up into smaller clips? We see amazing reach and engagement from those sorts of things. So start exploring thought leadership campaigns. It's going to do wonders for your brand. Yeah, Janet, I'll pass it back to you. What's your call to action?
Okay, I will say I never prepare these, so I do it on the fly. I'm going to go with, Leah mentioned in the beginning how important it is to like know your company, the people, the why, like the founders, and like the mission, the values, the ethos of the company, and even the culture. I love how you brought in culture. So I think if that feels really fuzzy for you as a marketer or within your organization, like figure out a way to have those conversations, get back to those basics to see are we really representing that in market and with our audience and customers. That's going to be mine. Do the research, do the homework, and go back to the blank page again. All right, Leah, what's your one call to action for our audience today and take away of all the amazing knowledge and tips that you shared today?
I also thought I would come up with it on the fly. So yeah, I was thinking while we were talking here. I think what I will say is if you are leading a brand project or you're rolling out a new brand campaign or a messaging, an updated messaging, you need to put it out there. Be encouraged to be involved at every level for the beginning. And this is not, I'm not coaching people to micromanage, but as you're getting those first instances out the door, boost your own confidence by being part of every piece, and going through them and being, being committed to consistency through those first little bits because everybody learns behind you. So all these advanced things we're talking about, like thought leaders and encouraging CFPs and ebooks with like partners and stuff, all of this comes from a really good, strong, consistent foundation. So spending that time and ensuring that your leaders know why you're investing that time and that effort up front to get that really solid foundation, because once that's firm, you can really delegate and like let the teams run off with it in a comfortable way. But if you are trying to, if you don't spend the time up front, then it's hard to
Right.
really run with it and get a good resonance. So I'm trying to say this carefully because I do not want people to feel like they have to micromanage
Oh no, I don't think so. Yeah,
but I think
definitely.
people wanna feel like nerd
Yeah.
out on it
Right.
at the front end, because it'll, like, reap rewards later.
Amazing.
I liked what you said too, Leah, a little bit earlier about being a detective at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the get curious, poke around corners and see how different people are thinking about stuff. I love that.
Like, honestly, like, I'm not a designer, but getting into, like, talking about the kerning on the font and
Right.
which variations of the color palette we are gonna use for, like, the bold level for, like, top headlines and, like, the pastel level for customer stories, and we wanna use this and that, like, even getting into the cross-functional departments, um, that and learning their language and understanding, like, it's the symphony, right? It's like you're the conductor of the symphony, so think higher than just one aspect of brand, and that's how you'll make a great brand.
Love it.
Love
All
it.
right. Well, you heard the one call to action there, but there's so many in here that folks can take this year. So we'd love to hear from you, our viewers, as well. How are you investing in brand in 2026? What actions are you going to plan to take this year? Or maybe already taking, like what's working, and like please share it. That's how we're all successful, by sharing knowledge together. So definitely let us know in the comments. Let us know on LinkedIn as we share this forward, and definitely be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode. So thank you again, Leah. Thank you so much for joining us on Call to Action, and we'll see you all next time.